John had been a good boy all day. In the afternoon, his mother sent him to the store to buy a loaf of bread, and she gave him 5 pennies to spend for himself. John put the pennies in his pocket and ran down the road. He had gone only a little way when he met a dog. John said, "I have 5 pennies to spend on candy all for myself. Isn't that dandy?" But the dog looked sad. He said to John, "If I had a penny all my own, know what I'd do? I'd buy a bone." John ran on. After a while, he met a cat. "Hello, cat," said John. He showed the cat the brown pennies and said, "I have 5 pennies to spend on candy all for myself. Isn't that dandy?" But the cat mewed sadly. "If I had a penny to spend as I wish, I'd buy myself a delicious fish." Then the cat curled up and went to sleep. John ran on till he met a squirrel. John showed his pennies to the squirrel. He said, "I have 5 pennies to spend on candy all for myself. Isn't that dandy?" The squirrel winked his bright little eyes. He said, "If I had a penny, I'd buy a nut and hide it away in my little tree hut." John ran on. After a little while, he saw a bird sitting on a fence post. John rattled his pennies until they sounded like music. The bird began to sing. John said, "I have 5 pennies to spend on candy all for myself. Isn't that dandy?" The bird stopped singing. It said, "If I had a penny for what I'd like best, I'd buy some cotton to line my nest." John ran on down the road. He was nearly to the store when he saw a pig. The pig was penned up in a yard. "Hi, pig," said John. "I have 5 pennies to spend on candy all for myself. Isn't that dandy?" The pig looked at John. Then he looked at his empty feeding trough, and this is what he said. "I've never had a penny since the day I was born, but if I had one, I'd buy some corn." 2 big tears ran out of the pig's eyes. John said goodbye and ran on to the store. It was a big country store that sold all kinds of things. John walked under a sign that said, "Tim McCoy's General Store." He looked all around. There were many things to see. Hay and feed, all kinds of seed, nails and screws and workmen's shoes, linens and dishes, meats and fishes, bolts of goods, raincoats with hoods, galoshes and mittens, and food for kittens, balls and bats and ladies' hats, fishing tackle, hens that cackle, skates and sleds, chairs and beds, pads and pencils, cooking utensils. Books were handy, and all kinds of candy. John bought the bread for his mother, then he walked up to the candy counter. He saw gumdrops and chocolates and taffy and lemon drops and butterscotch and sticks of licorice and lots of other kinds of candy. It all looked so good he didn't know which to choose. Then John saw a great big red lollipop. It had a face made of white peppermints. "I want that," said John. "How much is it?" "It costs 5 cents, said Mr. McCoy. "Shall I put it in your bag?" John was just about to say yes, when he thought of the dog, he thought of the cat, he thought of the squirrel, he thought of the bird, then he thought of the sad pig, and John changed his mind. He said, "Please give me a penny bone and a penny fish, and a penny's worth of nuts, and a penny's worth of cotton, and a penny's worth of corn." "What are you going to do with them?" asked Mr. McCoy in surprise. "I'm going to give them to my friends," said John, "the dog, the cat, the squirrel, the bird, and the pig." So Mr. McCoy put all those things into a paper bag. John gave him his 5 pennies and ran out. John felt very happy. He gave the corn to the pig, and the pig was happy. He gave the cotton to the bird, and the bird flew to her nest singing. John gave the nuts to the squirrel, and the squirrel chattered happily. John gave the fish to the cat, and the cat purred. He gave the bone to the dog, and the dog wagged his tail. John skipped home singing, "I had 5 pennies to spend on candy, but I spent them on my friends. Now wasn't that dandy?" John's mother met him at the door. He gave her the bag with the loaf of bread in it, but there was something else in the bottom of the bag. What do you suppose it was? It was a great big red lollipop with a face of white peppermints. On the stick was a note. It said, "For a good boy, from Mr. McCoy."